I always knew I was the forgettable sister. From the moment Nora was born, 3 years after me with a full head of auburn curls and eyes that seemed to sparkle even then, I became the faded photograph in our family album. Not that my parents would ever admit it. They'd insist they loved us equally, that we were both their precious daughters. But actions speak louder than words, and their actions had been screaming Nora's name for 27 years. Alice, there you are. Why are you hiding in the kitchen? My mother's voice cut through my thoughts as she bustled in, her designer dress shimmering under the pendant lights. She was carrying an empty champagne flute, no doubt looking to refill it before returning to the main event, Nora's engagement. Party. I'm not hiding, I lied, taking another sip of my own champagne, just getting a moment of quiet. Mom gave me that look, the one that said I was being difficult again. Well, your sister is about to make her speech. Everyone's waiting. She glanced critically at my appearance. Oh, honey, your lipstick has worn off. Here. She rummaged in her clutch and handed me a tube of coral lipstick that would look terrible. With my complexion, I took it anyway. I'll be right there, I promised, not making any move toward the lipstick or the door. With a sigh that could have powered a windmill, Mom left, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering behind her. I waited until her footsteps faded before setting down the lipstick unopened. I checked my reflection in the microwave door. My own lipstick, a soft mauve, was perfectly fine. It had been 29 years, and my mother still didn't know what. Colors suited me. The kitchen door swung open again, and I prepared another excuse, but it was just Samantha, my best friend since college, and the only reason I hadn't fabricated a work emergency to escape this party 3 hours ago. There's my favorite disappearing act, she said, hopping onto the counter beside me. Your sister's about to give what I'm sure will be a very humble and not at all self-congratulatory speech about finding her soulmate. I snorted. Want to place bets on how many times she mentions that Nicholas proposed on a private yacht in Santorini? No bet. It's been 7 times already, and that's just when I've been in earshot. Sam tilted her head. You holding up okay? I gave her my standard response. I'm fine. Bullshit. But I respect your right to bullshit me at your sister's engagement party. She clinked her glass against mine. Just remember, we're getting absolutely hammered at my place afterward, and then you're telling me everything that's actually going on in that head of yours. That made me smile, the first genuine one of the evening. Deal! Ladies! A deep voice boomed from the doorway. Nicholas Chen, Nora's fiancé, stood there with his characteristic grin. I'd been surprised when Nora started dating him 3 years ago. He was smart, successful, and genuinely kind, not her usual type at all. The kitchen brigade is being summoned. Nora's about to speak, and apparently it's a capital offense if her only sister isn't front and center. I rolled my eyes but slid off the counter. Duty calls. Nicholas fell into step beside me as we headed back to the main room. She's on her 4th glass of champagne, he whispered conspiratorially. This could get interesting. Terrific, I muttered. Drunk Nora was even more unpredictable than sober Nora. The party was being held at my parents' home, a sprawling colonial in Connecticut where we'd grown up. The living room had been transformed with flowers, twinkling lights, and photographs of the happy couple displayed on every available surface. Nearly 100 people were packed in, all dressed in their finest, all there to celebrate Nora and Nicholas's upcoming nuptials. Nora stood in the center of the room, champagne in hand, her emerald green dress making her look like a woodland goddess. Her hair was styled in loose waves, and her makeup was flawless. She caught sight of me and waved enthusiastically. There's my big sister, she called out, causing heads to turn in my direction. I forced a smile and gave a small wave back. Now we can start. I found a spot near the back of the crowd, but Mom appeared out of nowhere and pulled me forward until I was standing right in front of Nora. Sam and Nicholas flanked me, offering silent support. "Everyone, thank you so much for coming to celebrate with us tonight," Nora began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the room. "Nicholas and I are so blessed to have such amazing friends and family in our lives." She went on to tell the proposal story: yacht in Santorini, surprise photographer, custom ring, number 8 for those keeping count, thank our parents for their support, and share anecdotes about her and Nicholas's relationship. I kept my smile, fixed in place, nodding at appropriate moments. "And I have to give a special thank you to my sister Alice," Nora said suddenly, turning to me. My smile froze. We hadn't discussed me being mentioned in her speech. "Alice has always been my rock, my inspiration, and the person I look up to most in this world." I blinked in surprise. That was unexpectedly nice, even though she's still single at 32. There it was. The collective chuckle that rippled through the crowd made my cheeks burn. She's shown me what it means to be independent and focused, and she's been so supportive of my relationship with Nicholas from day one. Had I? I'd been cordial, certainly. But supportive felt like a stretch, especially given that I'd spent the first 6 months of their relationship waiting for Nora to lose interest, as she always did. "In fact," Nora continued, her smile widening, "Alice has been so supportive that she's letting me borrow her wedding dress for our big day." The room erupted in awes and applause. I stood there, completely stunned, my champagne flute suspended halfway to my lips. My wedding dress. The one I'd spent 2 years saving for, even though I wasn't engaged or even dating anyone seriously. The one I'd fallen in love with at a boutique in New York and put on layaway, making monthly payments until I finally owned it outright 6 months ago. The one that was currently hanging in a garment bag in my closet, unworn, waiting for a day that might never come. "Isn't that just the sweetest thing?" Nora gushed, either oblivious to or ignoring my shock. My sister giving me her dream dress. "Now we'll both have memories in it." Sam gripped my arm tightly. "Did you actually?" she whispered. "No," I hissed back. "Absolutely not." Nicholas looked between me and Nora, his brow furrowed in confusion. He clearly hadn't been privy to this announcement either. "To Alice," Nora raised her glass in my direction, "the best sister anyone could ask for." Everyone turned to me, glasses raised, smiles expectant. I stood there, paralyzed, as the truth hit me. Nora had done it again. She'd backed me into a corner where I could either go along with her narrative or look like the villain in front of everyone we knew. With my hands slightly shaking, I raised my glass and forced the words past my lips. "To the happy couple." The party continued around me, but I felt disconnected from it all, like I was watching from behind glass. My dress, my beautiful, perfect dress that I dreamed about wearing someday. The one thing I had that Nora didn't, and now she was taking. That too. Alice. Nicholas appeared at my side, concern evident in his eyes. "Did you really offer Nora your dress? Because she didn't mention it to me, and I know how much that dress means to you." I'd only met Nicholas a handful of times before he started dating Nora, but we'd always gotten along well. He was one of the few people who seemed to see me clearly, not just as Nora's less impressive sister. "No," I admitted quietly. "This is the first I'm hearing about it." His jaw tightened. "I'll talk to her." "Don't," I said quickly. "Not tonight. It'll just cause a scene. But please, Nicholas, I'll handle it myself." He didn't look convinced, but nodded reluctantly. "If you're sure, but for what it's worth, I think you should stand up for yourself." "Nora," he hesitated. "Nora sometimes doesn't realize when she's crossing a line." That was the understatement of the century. Nora didn't just cross lines, she erased them entirely and redrew them to suit herself. The party dragged on for another 2 hours. I smiled, made small talk, and avoided being alone with Nora or my parents. By the time the last guest left, I was emotionally exhausted and desperate to escape to Sam's apartment as planned. But as I was gathering my purse and coat, Mom caught me by the arm. "Alice, we need to talk about the dress," she said, her voice low but intense. "That was such a lovely gesture, but your father and I think you should let us pay you for it. It's only fair." So they believed Nora's version of events without question. Of course they did. "Mom, I never— Alice!" Nora bounded over, still full of energy despite the late hour. "Everyone loved the news about the dress. It's going to be so perfect for the wedding." "Nora, we need to talk about that," I started. But Mom interrupted. "We were just saying we want to reimburse Alice for the dress, honey. It's so generous of her, but it's an expensive gift." Nora waved dismissively. "No need. Alice wants me to have it, don't you, sis? It's just sitting in your closet anyway, and who knows when you'll actually need it." She laughed lightly, as if the idea of me getting married anytime soon was amusing. I felt something snap inside me. All the years of fading into the background, of Nora taking center stage, of my parents enabling her, it crystallized in that moment into a hard, sharp clarity. "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "I never offered you my dress, Nora. You never even asked me about it." Nora's smile faltered slightly before returning full force. "Of course I did. Remember, when I visited your apartment last month and we were looking through your closet? You saw the dress. You commented on it. You never asked to wear it, and I certainly never offered." Mom stepped between us. "Girls, it's late, and we're all tired. Let's not argue over a misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding," I insisted. "Nora announced to everyone that I'm lending her my dress without ever discussing it with me." "Well, now we're discussing it," Nora said, her tone hardening. "So, can I borrow it or not?" The expectant looks from both her and my mother told me everything I needed to know. They were waiting for me to fold, to give in as I always did, to put Nora's wants above my own needs. But not this time. "No," I said firmly. "No, you can't borrow my dress." The silence that followed was deafening. Nora's face flushed red, and Mom looked like I'd slapped her. "Alice," Mom said, her voice tight with disapproval, "don't be selfish. It's your sister's wedding." "It's my dress," I countered. "One that I spent 2 years saving for. One that I picked out and paid for myself." "And what are you saving it for?" Nora demanded. "It's not like you're getting married anytime soon." That hurt, but I didn't let it show. "That's not the point. The point is that it's mine, and you didn't ask. I'm asking now, and I'm saying no." Dad appeared from the kitchen, drawn by the rising voices. "What's going on?" Mom quickly filled him in, painting me as the unreasonable one, of course. Dad sighed heavily and turned to me. "Alice, it's just a dress. Your sister wants it for her special day. Can't you be a little flexible here? Just a dress," as if the thousands of dollars I'd saved, the countless overtime hours I'd worked, the careful budgeting I'd done, as if none of that mattered because it was just a dress. "Would you ask Nora to be flexible if the situation were reversed?" I asked quietly. Dad looked taken aback by the question. "That's different. Why? Because it's Nora? Because she's the one getting married? Because she's always been your favorite?" "Alice," Mom gasped. "That's a terrible thing to say." But Dad's silence and averted gaze said more than any denial could have. I'd never confronted them so directly about their favoritism before. It had always been this unspoken thing, this shadow that fell between us but was never acknowledged. Saying it out loud felt both terrifying and liberating. "I'm going to Sam's," I said, grabbing my coat. "We can talk about this when everyone's calmer." "If you walk out that door without resolving this, Alice Elizabeth Reynolds," Mom warned, "you're being incredibly selfish and hurtful to your sister." I paused at the door, turned back to look at my family, Mom indignant, Dad uncomfortable, Nora pouting, and realized something profound. I didn't care what they thought of me in that moment, not enough to give in anyway. "Good night," I said, and closed the door behind me. In Sam's car, I finally let the tears come. She drove in silence, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand. By the time we reached her apartment, I'd told her everything, not just about the dress, but about a lifetime of living in Nora's shadow. "I'm proud of you," she said, as we settled on her couch with glasses of wine. "You stood up for yourself. And now my family thinks I'm a selfish bitch. Your family needs a reality check." Sam took a sip of her wine. "So what are you going to do now?" I sighed. "I don't know. I can't take back what I said, and I don't want to. But Nora's wedding is in 3 months, and I'm supposed to be a bridesmaid. This is going to make things unbearably awkward. Maybe," Sam conceded, "or maybe it's time they all realize that Alice Reynolds has a backbone and isn't going to be overlooked anymore." "Is that what I'm doing? Standing up for myself?" I asked. "Because it feels an awful lot like I'm tearing my family apart over a dress." "It's not about the dress, Alice. It's about respect. It's about Nora finally understanding that she can't just take whatever she wants from you without asking. It's about your parents seeing you as an equal to your sister." She was right, of course. The dress was just a symbol of a much deeper issue. "I'm still a bridesmaid," I said, leaning back against the cushions. "I still have to face them all at the wedding." Sam grinned suddenly, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Yes, you do. And wouldn't it be something if, just for once, Nora didn't get exactly what she wanted on her special day?" "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. Yet. But let's just say karma has a way of catching up with people who take without asking. Sometimes it just needs a little nudge in the right direction." I should have been shocked at what Sam was implying. I should have shut down any talk of sabotage or revenge, but instead I found myself leaning forward, intrigued. "Tell me more." The Phi. Next morning I woke up on Sam's couch with a mild hangover and 17 missed calls, 8 from Nora, 5 from Mom, 3 from Dad, and 1 from Nicholas. I ignored them all and made coffee instead. "You know you'll have to talk to them eventually," Sam said, emerging from her bedroom, looking disgustingly well-rested despite our late night. "Eventually," I agreed. "Not today." My phone buzzed with a text. "Nicholas. Can we meet for coffee? Just us. I want to make sure you're okay." Nicholas was the wild card in all of this. He clearly loved Nora, but he also seemed to genuinely like me. And importantly, he wasn't blinded by a lifetime of Reynolds family dynamics. I texted back, "Sure. Milo's at 11? His response was immediate. "See you there." Milo's was a small cafe halfway between Sam's apartment and the architectural firm where Nicholas worked. I arrived first and claimed a table in the back corner, ordering a latte and trying to look more composed than I felt. Nicholas arrived 10 minutes later, spotting me immediately and making his way over. He was dressed in work attire, crisp button-down shirt, tailored slacks, but his expression was casual, concerned. "Hey," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Thanks for meeting me." "No problem," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant. "How bad is it at home?" he grimaced. "Nora's upset. She spent most of last night alternating between crying and ranting. Your parents are, well, they're taking her side, for the most part." "Of course they are." I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "For what it's worth," Nicholas said, leaning forward, "I think you're right. Nora should have asked before announcing anything about your dress. I've told her as much. That surprised me." "You're taking my side against your fiancé?" "I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying what I think is right." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I love Nora, but I also know she can be impulsive. She sees something she wants and goes for it without always thinking about how it affects others." "That's one way of putting it," I muttered. Nicholas smiled faintly. "She has a lot of wonderful qualities too, but in this case, she crossed a line, and I think deep down she knows it." "Is that why you wanted to meet? To tell me Nora feels bad?" "Partly," he admitted, "but also because I wanted to check on you. I know how much that dress means to you." I studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. "Why do you care so much about how I feel? Because you're going to be my sister-in-law, because I respect you, and because I think you deserve better than how you were treated last night." His frankness caught me off guard. In the 3 years he'd been with Nora, Nicholas had always been friendly, but we'd never had a conversation this personal before. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means a lot." He nodded, then hesitated before continuing. "Nora wants to talk to you. She's cooling down, and I think she's starting to realize she handled this badly. Would you be willing to meet with her? Maybe with me there as a buffer?" I sighed heavily. "I don't know, Nicholas. Every time I try to stand up to Nora, I end up giving in. She has this way of making me feel like I'm being unreasonable, even when I know I'm not." "I understand. But maybe this time could be different. If you're clear about your boundaries, and if I'm there to help keep the conversation on track." He shrugged. "It's your call. I just hate to see you two at odds like this." I traced the rim of my coffee cup, thinking. Part of me wanted to avoid the conversation entirely, to hold on to my anger and hurt. But another part knew that if I was going to be in Nora's wedding, we'd have to reach some kind of understanding. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll meet with her. But not at my parents' house." Nicholas's face relaxed with relief. "Thank you. How about dinner at our place tomorrow night? 7 o'clock? "Fine. But if she starts manipulating or guilt-tripping me, I'm leaving." "Fair enough." He hesitated, then added, "Just so you know, she's already bought a different dress. She found one at a boutique yesterday afternoon. That was fast." "So this dinner isn't about convincing me to lend her my dress?" "No. It's about repairing your relationship before the wedding." I wasn't sure that was possible, but I nodded anyway. "All right, 7 tomorrow. I'll be there." As Nicholas left, I sat back in my chair, feeling a mix of dread and determination. Tomorrow night would be a test of my resolve, of Nora's sincerity, of whether our sisterhood could survive this latest fracture. I spent the next day at work, grateful for the distraction of deadlines and meetings. As an event coordinator for a major hotel chain, I was used to managing other people's special occasions. There was a certain irony in being so good at making strangers' dreams come true while my own family life was in shambles. By the time I arrived at Nora and Nicholas's downtown apartment the following evening, I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say a dozen times. I'd be firm but fair. I wouldn't let Nora's tears or tantrums sway me. I would stand my ground. Nicholas answered the door with a warm smile that did little to ease my nerves. "Thanks for coming," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "Nora's just finishing up in the kitchen." Their apartment was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. It was tastefully decorated in a way that screamed professional interior designer, which made sense, as that was Nora's job. "Can I get you a drink?" Nicholas asked, gesturing to the wine already open on the counter. "Please," I said, shrugging off my jacket. "Red, if you have it." Coming right up. He poured me a generous glass of Merlot, which I accepted gratefully. Nora appeared from the kitchen, looking uncharacteristically subdued. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a sweater instead of her usual fashionable attire. Her eyes were slightly puffy, as if she'd been crying. "Alice," she said, her voice small, "thank you for coming." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. We moved to the dining table, where Nicholas had already set out plates and silverware. Dinner was a simple pasta dish, nothing fancy, which surprised me. Nora usually went all out when entertaining. We ate in awkward silence for a few minutes before Nicholas cleared his throat. "So, I thought we could use this time to clear the air. Alice, Nora has something she wants to say to you." Nora put down her fork and looked at me directly. "I'm sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have announced that I was borrowing your dress without asking you first. It was presumptuous and inconsiderate." I blinked, taken aback by the straightforward apology. I'd expected excuses, justifications, maybe even accusations. Not this. "Thank you for acknowledging that," I said carefully. "Nicholas helped me see how wrong I was," she continued, glancing affectionately at her fiancé. "And I want you to know that I've found another dress, one that's actually more me anyway." "Nicholas mentioned that," I replied, still wary. This contrite version of Nora was unfamiliar territory. "I also want to apologize for putting you on the spot in front of everyone." That wasn't fair. I took a sip of wine, considering my response. "Can I ask why you did it? Why announce it that way, without talking to me first?" Nora looked down at her plate. I guess I thought you'd say no if I asked privately. And I really wanted to wear your dress. It's beautiful. And it seemed like a special sister thing, to share a dress like that." She looked up, her eyes pleading. "I didn't think about how it would feel from your perspective." "That's been a pattern," I said quietly. "You not thinking about my perspective." Nicholas shifted uncomfortably in his seat but didn't intervene. "You're right," Nora admitted, surprising me again. "I've been selfish, not just about the dress, but about a lot of things." She took a deep breath. "Mom and Dad called me out on it, actually, after you left the other night. That was perhaps the most shocking revelation of all." "Mom and Dad criticized you?" Nora nodded. "Dad especially. He said, I needed to stop taking you for granted, that I needed to remember you're not just my sister, you're your own person with your own life and dreams." I tried to reconcile this with the father who had silently taken Nora's side at the engagement party. "That doesn't sound like Dad." "I think seeing you stand up for yourself made an impression," Nicholas offered. "It made them all realize they've been enabling unhealthy dynamics." I wasn't entirely convinced, but I nodded anyway. "So where does this leave us? With the wedding coming up?" "I still want you to be my bridesmaid," Nora said quickly. "More than ever, actually. I want us to repair our relationship, Alice. I don't want to lose my sister over a dress or over my selfishness." Her words seemed sincere, her expression genuinely remorseful, and yet a lifetime of experience with Nora made me cautious. She had a talent for saying exactly what people wanted to hear when it served her purposes. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "And I still want to be part of your wedding. But I need to know that things are really going to change, Nora. That you're not just saying what you think I want to hear until you get what you want." "I understand," she said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I'm going to prove it to you, I promise, starting now." The dinner ended on a tentatively positive note. We didn't resolve everything. Years of inequality couldn't be fixed in one evening, but it felt like a start. As Nicholas walked me to the door, he squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. "Thank you for giving her a chance," he said. "I know it's not easy." "She's lucky to have you," I replied. "You're good for her," he smiled. "I hope so. I love her, flaws and all, and I want her to be the best version of herself." As I headed home that night, I felt lighter than I had in days. Maybe, just maybe, this confrontation over the dress would lead to real change in my family. Maybe Nora was truly seeing me for the first time. But as the weeks passed, that optimism faded. Nora's newfound consideration lasted about a week before old patterns resurfaced. She began calling me at all hours with wedding demands. Could I pick up the table decorations? Would I mind hosting her bridal shower since Mom's house was being renovated? Could I take her friends out for her bachelorette because she couldn't decide on a date and now everything was booked? Each request came with the assumption that I would rearrange my life to accommodate her, just as I always had. And despite my resolutions, I found myself saying yes more often than no. It was easier than dealing with her disappointment or our parents' pressure. 2 weeks before the wedding, I met Sam for lunch, exhausted from juggling Nora's demands with my own full-time job. "I don't understand why you're still letting her walk all over you," Sam said bluntly as we picked at our salads. I thought you were going to stand up for yourself. I am, I protested. Just selectively. Sam raised an eyebrow. Selectively, as in almost never? I sighed. It's complicated, Sam. She apologized about the dress. She seemed genuinely remorseful. And then she just went back to being Nora. And you went back to being doormat Alice, Sam said, then immediately looked contrite. I'm sorry. That was harsh. But I hate seeing you sacrifice your own happiness for someone who doesn't appreciate it. I know. I pushed a tomato around my plate. I keep thinking about what you said that night after the engagement party. About karma. A slow smile spread across Sam's face. Are you saying you're ready to give karma a little nudge? Maybe, I admitted. Nothing too drastic, just something to remind Nora that actions have consequences. Well, Sam said, leaning forward, I might have an idea. It involves the fountain. What fountain? The one at Nora's wedding venue. The one she specifically requested to be part of the ceremony backdrop. I narrowed my eyes. What are you thinking? Let's just say I know someone who works at the venue, someone who might be willing to make a small adjustment to the fountains. Timing and pressure. Nothing dangerous, just unpredictable. Sam, we're not doing anything harmful, she assured me. Just creating an opportunity for a little cosmic justice. If Nora has truly changed, if she's being considerate and thoughtful about her wedding choices, then nothing will happen. But if she's making selfish decisions without considering others, I shouldn't have been tempted. I really shouldn't. But after weeks of returning to the same old patterns, of watching my momentary victory fade into the background, I found myself nodding. Tell me more, I said, and so the plan was set in motion. Sam's friend at the venue, a fellow event coordinator, who had dealt with Nora's increasingly demanding behavior during the planning process, agreed to adjust the fountain's controls. It would appear to be functioning normally during the rehearsal, but at the ceremony, the pressure would randomly increase at unpredictable intervals. It's subtle, Sam explained. Maybe nothing will even happen. But if Nora insists on standing too close, or if she positions someone else too close without consideration, I knew it was wrong. I knew I should be the bigger person. But a small, vindictive part of me, the part that had been overlooked and taken for granted for years, was thrilled at the prospect of Nora finally facing consequences for her actions. The week of the wedding arrived, and with it, a renewed flurry of activity. As a bridesmaid, I was expected to attend the rehearsal dinner, the bridal luncheon, the spa day, and countless other pre-wedding events. Nora was in full bride mode, alternating between stressed micromanagement and tearful gratitude for everyone's help. At the rehearsal, everything went smoothly. The fountain burbled pleasantly in the background as we practiced our procession and positions. Nora had indeed found another wedding dress, a designer gown that suited her perfectly and probably cost twice what mine had. My parents beamed with pride as they watched their younger daughter prepare for her special day. After the rehearsal dinner, Nicholas pulled me aside. "How are you holding up?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "I'm fine," I said automatically. He gave me a skeptical look. "Alice, come on. It's me. You've been quiet all evening." I sighed. "Just tired. It's been a long week." "I know Nora's been demanding a lot from you. I've tried to rein her in, but..." He shrugged helplessly. "It's okay," I said. "Tomorrow's her day. We all just want it to be perfect." Nicholas studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Well, I'm grateful you're here. It means a lot to both of us." His sincerity made guilt twist in my stomach. Nicholas didn't deserve any collateral damage from my petty revenge scheme, but it was too late to back out now. The fountain was set, and whatever would happen, would happen. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the outdoor ceremony Nora had insisted upon. I arrived at the venue early, helping the other bridesmaids set up the final details while Nora and my mother were at the salon getting their hair done. Sam texted me, "Everything's in place. Whatever happens today, remember it's just karma doing its job." I texted back a simple thumbs up, my stomach churning with a mix of anticipation and regret. When Nora arrived, she was already in full bride mode, radiant, excited, and completely focused on herself. She barely acknowledged me as the makeup artist worked on her face, too busy giving instructions about the exact shade of eyeshadow she wanted. "Alice," she called out at one point, "can you check if Mom brought my special hairpins, the ones from Grandma?" "Sure," I said, slipping out of the bridal suite. I found my mother in the venue's main hall, directing the florist on the exact placement of arrangements. "Mom, did you bring Nora's hairpins?" She looked momentarily flustered. "I thought you had them?" "No, Nora never gave them to me." "Oh dear." Mom looked genuinely distressed. "They must still be at the house. She'll be devastated." She was so set on wearing them. "I can go get them," I offered, already reaching for my purse. "I have time before I need to get ready." Mom's face relaxed with relief. "Would you? That would be such a help, Alice. Thank you." And just like that, I was dispatched on yet another errand for Nora's perfect day. As I drove to my parents' house, a 40-minute round trip, I couldn't help but reflect on the pattern we were all locked in. Nora needed something. I provided it, and life went on with minimal acknowledgement of my sacrifice. But today, that pattern might finally be disrupted. When I returned with the hairpins, Nora barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, good, you found them. Just put them there." No thank you. No acknowledgement of the time I'd taken. Just an expectation that I would, as always, come through for her. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. By 3:30, we were all dressed and ready. Nora, in her designer gown, the bridesmaids, including me, in pale blue dresses that Nora had chosen, despite knowing the color washed me out completely. As we lined up for the processional, I caught sight of the fountain. It looked completely normal, bubbling away just as it had during the rehearsal. Sam gave me a subtle nod from her seat in the audience. The music began, and one by one, the bridesmaids walked down the aisle. I was last before Nora, and as I took my place at the altar, I turned to watch my sister make her entrance. She was breathtaking, I had to admit. Whatever issues existed between us, Nora was a stunning bride. She floated down the aisle on our father's arm, her face glowing with happiness. Nicholas looked like he might actually faint from joy as he watched her approach. They met at the altar and the ceremony began. Everything proceeded perfectly, the readings, the vows, the ring exchange. The fountain burbled quietly in the background, apparently behaving itself. For a moment, I felt a mix of relief and disappointment. Maybe the plan had failed. Maybe that was for the best. Then came time for the unity ceremony. Nora had chosen a sand ceremony where she and Nicholas would pour colored sand into a shared container. They moved to a small table set up near the fountain, closer than they had been during the rehearsal. As they lifted their vials of sand, I noticed a subtle change in the fountain's flow. The water seemed to be rising higher, the pressure increasing, ever so slightly. Nora, focused on the ceremony, didn't notice. She and Nicholas began pouring their sand, smiling at each other, the celebrant speaking about two lives becoming one. That's when it happened. The fountain pressure suddenly increased dramatically, sending a spray of water arcing over the ceremony table. It caught Nora directly, drenching the back of her dress and her carefully styled hair. She shrieked, jumping back, but it was too late. The damage was done. Her dress was soaked, her makeup beginning to run, her hair collapsing from its elaborate style. The audience gasped. Nicholas instinctively moved to shield Nora from further spray, getting wet himself in the process. The celebrant quickly called for someone to turn off the fountain, and venue staff rushed to comply. In the chaos that followed, I stood frozen, watching the scene unfold with a mix of horror and vindication. This was exactly what Sam and I had planned. A moment of karma, a small revenge for years of selfishness. And yet, seeing Nora's stricken face, her perfect day suddenly derailed, I felt no satisfaction. Only shame. Mom and Dad rushed forward to help Nora, who was now openly crying. Nicholas put his arm around her, whispering reassurances. The guests murmured amongst themselves, some looking concerned, others barely concealing their amusement. "It'll be okay," I heard Nicholas say. "We'll take a break, get you dried off, and continue. This doesn't ruin anything." But Nora was inconsolable. "My dress," she wailed, "my perfect dress." As I watched her distress, something strange happened. Rather than feeling guilty or smug, I felt nothing. The years of resentment, the constant competition, the dress drama, all of it suddenly seemed so trivial. This was my sister, flawed and sometimes selfish, but still my sister, and I had deliberately contributed to ruining her wedding day. I moved forward without thinking, slipping off my bridesmaid shawl. "Here," I said, offering it to Nora. "Use this to blot some of the water." She looked at me through mascara-streaked eyes. "My dress is ruined," she repeated, as if I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. "It's just water," I said gently. "It will dry, and no one will care or remember. They'll just remember how beautiful you looked and how happy you and Nicholas are." Nora blinked at me, surprised by my calm response. "But the pictures will show that not even a fountain malfunction could stop your wedding," I finished for her. It's a better story this way, honestly. A flicker of something, recognition perhaps, passed across Nora's face. "You're not upset?" "Why would I be upset? It's not my wedding." I paused, then added, "And it wasn't my dress." The words hung between us, weighted with meaning. Nora had the grace to look abashed. "Right," she said quietly. "Not your dress." Mom appeared with towels, and the wedding coordinator quickly ushered Nora to a private room to assess the damage. The guests were informed there would be a brief delay, and refreshments were served to keep everyone occupied. I found myself standing alone near the now subdued fountain, guilt gnawing at me. This had been my doing, or at least I had been complicit. And for what? A moment of petty revenge that had brought me no joy, only shame. You know, don't you? I turned to find Nicholas standing beside me, his expression unreadable. "Know what?" I asked, my heart racing. "About the fountain, that it wasn't an accident." I swallowed hard. "What makes you say that?" "The look on your face when it happened. You weren't surprised, just resigned." He sighed. "Plus, I overheard Sam on the phone yesterday talking about the plan." My cheeks burned with embarrassment. "Nicholas, He held up a hand. "I'm not angry, Alice, not really. Disappointed, maybe. I thought you were better than that." His quiet disappointment was worse than any anger would have been. "I am better than that," I said. "Or at least, I want to be. I don't know what came over me. All these years of feeling invisible next to Nora, and then the dress incident. I just snapped." "I understand," he said, surprising me. "Nora can be challenging. I love her, but I'm not blind to her flaws. She can be selfish, entitled. She doesn't always consider how her actions affect others." "No," I agreed. "She doesn't. But this," he gestured toward the fountain, "this isn't the way to handle it. All you've done is reinforce the drama. Given her another story where she's the victim, where everyone rushes to comfort poor Nora." I hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. "I've made it worse, haven't I?" Nicholas softened slightly. "Maybe not. This could still be a turning point if you choose to make it one." "How?" "By being honest. With Nora, with your parents, with yourself. Stop playing the role of the overlooked older sister. Stop waiting for them to notice you're drowning. Tell them how you feel, directly and honestly." It sounded so simple when he put it that way. And yet the thought of that level of vulnerability with my family terrified me. "I don't know if I can," I admitted. You stood up to them about the dress, he pointed out. That was a start. Before I could respond, the wedding coordinator approached us. We're ready to resume, she announced. Nora's dress has been blotted as dry as possible, and we've touched up her makeup and hair. Nicholas nodded. Thank you. I'll take my place. At the altar. As he walked away, he gave me one last meaningful look. Think about what I said, Alice. This is your chance to break the cycle. The ceremony resumed with minimal further drama. Nora's dress was noticeably damp in places, but she held her head high, determined to proceed with dignity. When the celebrant pronounced them husband and wife, the audience erupted in enthusiastic applause, perhaps more enthusiastic than usual, a show of support for the bride who had persevered through misfortune. At the reception, I kept to myself, nursing a glass of champagne and avoiding both Sam and my parents. Sam caught my eye several times, giving me questioning looks, but I wasn't ready to discuss what had happened. The guilt and shame were still too raw. As dinner concluded and the dancing began, Nora appeared at my side. She had changed into her reception dress, a simpler, sleeker gown that had thankfully been stored well away from the fountain. Can we talk? She asked, gesturing toward the venue's terrace. I nodded, following her outside. The evening air was cool, stars just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Nicholas told me, she said without preamble. My stomach dropped. Told you what? About the fountain, that it wasn't an accident, that you and Sam arranged it. I closed my eyes briefly. Nora, is it true? She demanded. There was no point denying it. Yes, I admitted. I'm sorry. It was childish and mean-spirited, and I regret it completely. To my surprise, Nora didn't immediately explode with rage. Instead, she leaned against the balustrade, looking out at the gardens below. Why? She asked quietly. It was the opening I needed, the chance to finally say what I'd been holding back for years. Because I was hurt, I said. Not just about the dress, but about everything. About always being in your shadow. About Mom and Dad always taking your side. About you announcing you were taking my dress without even asking me. It felt like the final straw. So you decided to ruin my wedding? No, I said quickly. I never wanted to ruin your wedding. I don't know what I wanted. For you to feel what it's like to not get your way, maybe. For there to be some consequences to how you treat people. It was stupid and petty, and I'm truly sorry. Nora was quiet for a long moment. You know, she said finally, when that fountain went off, my first thought wasn't about my dress or my hair. It was, Alice is going to be so upset that my perfect wedding is ruined. That caught me off guard. What? Why would you think that? Because you've always cared more about my happiness than I deserved, she said simply. You've always been the one making sure everything goes right for me, fixing my mistakes, covering for me when I mess up. Even when I took things too far, like with your dress, you've always eventually forgiven me and helped make things better. I stared at her, unsure how to respond. It never occurred to me that you might resent it, she continued. That you might be tired of putting me first. I just assumed that's what you wanted to do, because you loved me. I do love you, I said. But yes, sometimes I resent always being the one who has to compromise, always being the one who gives in. I've been selfish, Nora admitted. All my life, really. And everyone, Mom, Dad, you've all enabled it. No one ever really called me out on it, not until the dress incident. And even then, I managed to smooth things over without really changing. It was the most self-aware I'd ever heard Nora be. Nicholas has been good for you, I observed. He has, she agreed. He loves me, but he doesn't let me get away with my worst behavior, not like everyone else. She turned to face me, fully. I'm sorry, Alice, not just for the dress, but for everything, for taking you for granted, for not seeing how much you've sacrificed for me. The apology was so unexpected, so genuine, that I felt tears prick at my eyes. "Thank you," I managed. "And I'm sorry about your dress," she continued. "I should never have tried to take it from you. It's yours, and it's special to you, and I had no right to it." "I appreciate that," I said. "And I'm sorry about the fountain. It was a terrible way to express my frustration." Nora smiled faintly. "I don't know. Maybe I needed a literal splash of cold water to wake me up." She reached out and took my hand. "Can we start over, Alice? As equals, not as the golden child and the responsible one? I want a real relationship with my sister." The sincerity in her eyes gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, this time things could be different. "I'd like that," I said. We hugged, awkwardly at first, then with genuine warmth. When we pulled apart, Nora wiped at her eyes, careful not to smudge her makeup. "We should get back," she said. "It's almost time for the first dance." As we turned to go inside, I spotted our parents watching us from the doorway. They looked concerned, clearly having witnessed our intense conversation. "Everything okay?" Dad asked as we approached. "Better than okay," Nora said, linking her arm through mine. "We're finally being honest with each other." Mom looked between us, uncertain. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, finding my voice, "that I've been feeling overlooked and undervalued in this family for a long time, and I'm not going to stay silent about it anymore." Mom's expression shifted from concern to indignation. "Alice, this is hardly the time." "Actually," Nora interrupted, "I think it's exactly the time. I've been self-absorbed and entitled, and you and Dad have encouraged it, and Alice has been paying the price." Mom and Dad exchanged startled glances. This united front from their daughters was clearly unexpected. "We only ever wanted what was best for both of you," Dad said defensively. "I know," I replied, softening my tone. "But what you thought was best wasn't always fair or balanced." "We can talk about this later," Mom said, glancing around nervously at nearby guests. "Right now, it's Nora's wedding, and Nora wants her sister to be happy," Nora finished firmly. "Which means acknowledging that things need to change in our family. Starting now." Our parents looked thoroughly taken aback. For perhaps the first time in their lives, they were facing a situation where neither their golden child nor their reliable one was following the expected script. "Well," Dad said after a moment, "I suppose we have some things to discuss. As a family." "We do," I agreed. "But not tonight. Tonight is for celebrating." I turned to Nora. "Your husband is waiting for that first dance." She squeezed my hand gratefully. "Will you stand with me? Right at the front?" "Of course," I said. "That's what sisters do." As the reception continued, something subtle but significant had shifted. Nora made sure I was included in everything. The photos, the toasts, the special moments. She publicly thanked me in her speech for being the best sister anyone could ask for, even when I didn't deserve it. And when she threw her bouquet, I could have sworn she aimed directly at me. I didn't. Catch it, Sam did, ironically enough, but the intention was clear. Nora was trying, in her own way, to make amends. After the newlyweds departed for their honeymoon, I helped with the cleanup, gathering gift envelopes and making sure nothing important was left behind. My parents approached as I was finishing. "Up!" "Alice," Mom began hesitantly, "we've been thinking about what you and Nora said earlier." "Oh?" I tried to keep my tone neutral. "We never meant to make you feel less valued," Dad said, his expression troubled. "We always thought of you as the strong one, the one who didn't need as much attention or support." "Everyone needs support, Dad," I said quietly. "Everyone needs to know they're valued." "You're right," Mom admitted. "We took you for granted because you never complained, never demanded attention the way Nora did. That was wrong of us." It was hardly a complete acknowledgement of the years of favoritism, but it was a start. "Thank you for saying that," I said. We'd like to do better, Dad added, to be more conscious of how we treat you both, if you're willing to give us that chance. I considered their offer. Part of me wanted to hold on to my resentment, to make them work harder for my forgiveness, but another part, the part that had felt ashamed of the fountain incident, recognized that holding grudges would only perpetuate the cycle. I'd like that, I said finally, but it will take time and real effort. We understand, Mom said, reaching out to squeeze my hand. We love you, Alice, both of you. We just haven't always shown it fairly. As I drove home that night, exhausted, but strangely at peace, I reflected on the day's events. What had started as a petty revenge scheme had somehow turned into a catalyst for honest communication and potential change. The fountain incident, meant to be Nora's comeuppance, had instead been my own wake-up call about the kind of person I wanted to be. A text from Nicholas appeared on my phone as I pulled into my apartment complex. Thank you for everything today. Nora can't stop talking about how much your conversation meant to her. I think this is a new beginning for both of you. I smiled, texting back, I think so too. Take care of her in Italy. And Nicholas, thank you for pushing us both to be better. His response came quickly. That's what family does. Family. The word had always been complicated for me, associated with comparison, favoritism, unmet expectations. But maybe, just maybe, it could mean something different going forward, something healthier, more balanced. A relationship where I was valued not for what I did for others, but simply for who I was. 2 days later, another text arrived, this one from Nora. Honeymoon is amazing, but I've been thinking about you. When we get back, let's have dinner. Just us. No parents, no Nicholas, just sisters. I stared at the message, feeling a mix of hope and cautious optimism. I'd like that, I replied. 3 weeks later, I found myself standing in my bedroom, staring at the garment bag hanging on my closet door. Inside was my wedding dress, the one I'd saved for, the one Nora had tried to take, the one that had inadvertently sparked a family reckoning. I unzipped the bag slowly, running my fingers over the delicate fabric. It was still beautiful, still perfect. But it no longer seemed to hold quite the same significance. It was just a dress after all. My worth, my identity, my happiness, none of these things depended on a piece of clothing, no matter how lovely. My phone rang, displaying Sam's name. Hey, I answered. So, she said without preamble, drinks tonight to celebrate my new job? Absolutely. Where and when? 7 at Marlowe's. And Alice? Bring a date if you want. I paused, surprised by the suggestion. A date? Since when do we bring dates to our celebrations? Since I've noticed the way you and that new guy from your office look at each other, Sam said, a smile evident in her voice. The tall one with the glasses who was asking about you at the company picnic? Daniel? I felt a blush creep up my cheeks, grateful Sam couldn't see it. We're just colleagues. Well, colleague or not, you should invite him. Open yourself up to possibilities, Alice. That's what this whole journey has been about, right? Claiming your own happiness instead of always putting others first. She had a point. The past month had been transformative, not just in my relationship with Nora and my parents, but in how I viewed myself and my own worth. I'd started speaking up more at work, pursuing projects I was passionate about, rather than just those I knew I could execute flawlessly. I'd even signed up for a photography class, something I'd been wanting to do for years, but had always put off. Maybe I will, I said, surprising myself with my decisiveness. He did mention he likes jazz, and Marlowe's has that great trio on Thursdays. That's my girl, Sam said approvingly. See you at 7. As I hung up, my gaze returned to the wedding dress. For so long, I'd seen it as a symbol of my future, of possibilities yet to come. But now I realized that waiting for someday was just another way of putting my life on hold. With sudden resolve, I zipped the garment bag closed and picked up my phone again. I searched for a moment, then dialed a number. Hello, brides for a cause? Yes, I'd like to donate a wedding dress. The dress that had caused so much drama would go to a charity that provided wedding gowns to those who couldn't afford them, with proceeds supporting women's causes. It felt right, transforming something that had been a source of conflict into something that could bring joy to someone else. As I made arrangements for the donation, I felt lighter, freer. The dress had served its purpose, not as something I would wear down the aisle someday, but as the catalyst for change I hadn't known I needed. Later, as I was getting ready for drinks with Sam, my phone chimed with a text from Nora. Just saw the cutest little cafe that reminded me of the one we used to go to with Grandma. Miss you. Can't wait for sister dinner next week. I smiled, typing back, miss you too. Safe travels home. It was a simple exchange, but it represented something profound, a new relationship forming from the ashes of the old one. Not perfect, not without its challenges, but real and honest in a way it had never been before. As I headed out the door, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked different somehow, more confident, more at peace. The invisible weight of resentment and inadequacy that I'd carried for so long had begun to lift. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Looking forward to tonight. Save me a seat? I smiled, typing back, already did. See you at 7. The future stretched before me, full of possibilities I was finally ready to embrace. Not as Alice, the reliable sister, or Alice, the overlooked daughter, but simply as Alice, a woman discovering, at last, the power of putting herself first.